The coffee was getting cold, but Lieutenant Commander Roxanne Phoenix Alvarez didn't notice. She sat in the corner booth of Mel's diner, still wearing her flight suit beneath a leather jacket, trying to forget the disciplinary hearing that had grounded her indefinitely. 3 months of desk duty for insubordination and reckless endangerment, all because she'd saved 14 Marines by disobeying a direct order to abort a rescue mission in Syria. The bureaucrats didn't understand that sometimes you had to trust your instincts over protocol. The diner was nearly empty at 2:47 a.m., just her, the night shift waitress, and a trucker nursing his third cup of coffee. That's when the man walked in. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of controlled movement that screamed special operations. He wore civilian clothes, but Phoenix could spot military from a mile away. It was in the way he scanned the room, cataloged exits, positioned himself with his back to the wall. He chose table 6, directly in her line of sight, ordered black coffee and pie, nothing unusual. But when the waitress brought his order, he did something that made Phoenix's blood freeze. 3 precise taps on the table edge. A pause. 2 more taps. Then he traced a small circle on the surface with his finger. Black Hawk Down Protocol. Emergency Extraction Code. Phoenix had learned that sequence during her classified stint with Joint Special Operations Command. It was used only when conventional communication channels were compromised, when American lives hung in the balance, and when every second mattered. The kind of code that meant somewhere right now, people were dying. The SEAL, because that's what he had to be, caught her eye. His expression was stone, but she saw the desperation underneath. He mouthed a single word: Kandahar. Afghanistan, where her squadron had been deployed 6 months ago, where Operation Iron Eagle had gone sideways, leaving assets stranded behind enemy lines. Assets that were supposed to be dead according to official reports. Phoenix felt the familiar fire ignite in her chest, the same flame that had driven her to become the first female pilot to fly combat missions with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. The same fire that had gotten her grounded for putting mission success over military politics. She stood abruptly, the table rocking as her knee hit the edge. Coffee spilled across the formica surface, seeping into the worn patterns of countless other late-night conversations. The SEAL's eyes never left hers as she walked toward him, her combat boots silent on the checkered linoleum. Some missions chose you. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across both their faces. Outside, the desert wind rattled the windows, carrying with it the promise of violence and the weight of unfinished business. Phoenix had been grounded, but she was still a pilot, still a warrior. And somewhere in the darkness of Kandahar, Americans were waiting to come home. The SEAL slid a manila envelope across the table as Phoenix approached. Her fingers closed around it, feeling the weight of photographs and coordinates inside. Intelligence that wouldn't exist through official channels. Black operations that never happened, involving people who were never there. "Call Mongoose," he said quietly, his voice carrying the gravel of a man who'd screamed orders over gunfire. "My team's been dark for 72 hours. Last known position was Grid 41 RQQ 897345, 20 clicks northwest of Fob Chapman." Phoenix memorized the coordinates automatically, her mind already calculating flight paths and fuel requirements. What kind of assets are we talking about? 6 operators, intelligence package, high-value target that could shift the entire regional balance. Mongoose's knuckles were white around his coffee cup. Problem is, officially they were never deployed. Unofficially, they've got maybe 18 hours before they're overrun. The envelope contained satellite photos of a remote compound, infrared signatures showing heat concentrations that meant human presence. Phoenix studied the terrain, noting the narrow valleys that would provide cover for low-altitude flight but limit escape routes. It was the kind of mission that required precision flying, split-second timing, and a pilot willing to bend every regulation in the book. Exactly the kind of mission that had gotten her grounded. "Why me?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Half the pilots in SOAR could run this extraction. Mongoose leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Because you're the only pilot who's successfully extracted personnel from that specific valley system. Operation Dust Devil, 18 months ago. You brought out 12 Rangers when everyone said it was impossible." Phoenix remembered. The narrow canyon approach, the crosswinds that had nearly torn her MH-60 apart, the rockets screaming past her cockpit as she held the hover while Rangers fast-roped into hell. She'd taken 3 rounds through her rotor system and still managed to complete the mission. "That was different. I had authorization then." "Authorization's a luxury when American lives are on the line." Mongoose pulled out a satellite phone, placing it on the table between them. "This goes active in 4 hours. When it rings, you'll have a 10-minute window to reach the designated coordinates before the whole operation goes dark permanently." The waitress refilled their coffee cups, oblivious to the conversation that could spark an international incident. Phoenix stared at the phone, knowing that picking it up would mean crossing a line she couldn't uncross. Court-martial, prison time, the end of everything she'd worked for. But somewhere in Afghanistan, 6 American operators were counting down their final hours. She thought about the commendation locked in her desk drawer, the one that praised her unwavering commitment to bringing every warrior home. Empty words from politicians who'd never felt the weight of lives in their hands. Phoenix had joined the military to serve something greater than herself, not to shuffle papers and follow orders that got good people killed. The desert wind picked up outside, rattling the diner's windows like rifle fire. Mongoose watched her with the patience of a man who understood impossible choices. He'd made them too, she realized, probably more than she could imagine. "What aircraft?" she asked. A slight smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. MH-60M Direct Action Penetrator, fully loaded night vision package, countermeasures suite. He paused. "Your bird from Syria. They pulled it from the boneyard this morning." Her bird, the same aircraft she'd nursed through 3 combat deployments, that had brought her home from missions that should have been death sentences. They tried to retire it after the Syria incident, claiming structural damage, but Phoenix knew better. That helicopter had more fight left in it than half the pilots flying it. "Where?" The word came out rougher than she'd intended. "Hangar 18, Davis-Monthan. Your maintenance chief, Sergeant First Class Morrison, he's been working on her all week, claimed it was routine inspection." Mongoose's expression hardened. "Seems like a lot of people believe in bringing warriors home." Morrison, the grizzled crew chief who taught her more about helicopter maintenance than any technical manual. He'd been with her through every deployment, every mission, every close call. If he was involved, then this operation had roots deeper than one rogue SEAL. Phoenix thought about the hearing 3 months ago, the panel of officers who'd looked at her like she was a problem to be solved, rather than a pilot who'd risked everything for her brothers and sisters in arms. They'd talked about protocol, about following orders, about the bigger picture. None of them had ever held a dying Marine in their arms while calling for extraction that would never come. The satellite phone sat silent between them, counting down toward a choice that would define the rest of her life. Outside, the first hints of dawn touched the eastern horizon, painting the sky the color of old blood. In 6 hours, the sun would be setting over Kandahar, and American operators would be fighting for their lives in the darkness. Phoenix picked up the phone. The drive to Davis-Monthan took 47 minutes through empty desert highways, Mongoose following in a separate vehicle to maintain operational security. Phoenix's mind raced through pre-flight procedures, threat assessments, and mission parameters she'd have to calculate without official intelligence support. No weather briefings, no updated enemy positions, no backup assets if everything went sideways. Flying blind into the most dangerous airspace in Afghanistan. The base was quiet in the pre-dawn darkness, most personnel still asleep or finishing night shifts. Phoenix used her still-active ID to access the flight line, her heart pounding as they approached Hangar 18. Part of her expected to find empty space where her helicopter should be. This whole thing revealed as an elaborate test of her loyalty. Instead, she found Morrison. The crew chief was bent over the engine compartment of her MH-60M, his weathered hands making final adjustments to systems she'd trusted with her life more times than she could count. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable in the harsh, fluorescent light. "Figured you'd be along eventually," he said, wiping his hands on an oil-stained rag. "She's ready, ma'am. All systems green, fuel topped off, ammo loaded." He paused, meeting her eyes. "Whatever this is about, just bring her home in one piece." Phoenix ran her hand along the aircraft's fuselage, feeling the patches where rounds had punched through aluminum during their last official mission. The helicopter seemed smaller than she remembered, but that was always how it was on the ground. She looked like just another machine. In the air, she was salvation with rotor blades. "Morrison," she started, but he cut her off. "Don't ask me questions I can't answer, Phoenix. Just know that some of us still remember what we swore to protect." He handed her a flight helmet, the same one she'd worn through 3 deployments. "Your co-pilot's already aboard, Lieutenant Torres from the 160th. Phoenix frowned. She hadn't requested a co-pilot, hadn't even known this mission would have official support. Torres was young but capable, one of the few pilots who'd actually listened during her tactical flying seminars instead of dismissing her as another diversity quota. She climbed into the cockpit, finding Torres already running through pre-flight checks. The younger woman looked up, her expression mixing nervousness with determination. "Ma'am, I know this isn't exactly standard operating procedure." "None of this is standard, Torres. You sure you want to be here?" Torres' jaw set in a way that reminded Phoenix of herself at that age. "Those operators in Kandahar, one of them's my brother." The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't a rogue operation. It was a family rescue mission that happened to involve national security. Someone with serious pull had orchestrated this entire scenario, from Phoenix's convenient presence at the diner to Morrison's miraculous resurrection of a supposedly damaged aircraft. The satellite phone buzzed against her thigh. Show time. Phoenix accepted the encrypted call, knowing that her voice was being recorded by parties unknown. Phoenix Actual. Grid coordinates 41 RQQ 897345. Package requires immediate extraction. Time window closing in 90 minutes. The voice was distorted by encryption, but she caught the urgency underneath the professional calm. Be advised, enemy activity has increased significantly in the target area. Understood. Phoenix's wheels up in 10 minutes. The line went dead. Phoenix looked at Torres, seeing her own reflection in the younger pilot's night vision goggles. 2 women about to fly an unauthorized mission into enemy territory to save people who officially didn't exist. It would have been funny if lives weren't hanging in the balance. "You ready for this, Torres?" "Ready as I'll ever be, Phoenix." Phoenix began the startup sequence, her hands moving automatically through procedures she could perform blindfolded. The twin General Electric T700 engines spooled up with their familiar whine, rotor blades beginning their rhythmic beat against the desert air. Through the cockpit glass, she could see Morrison giving them a thumbs up from the hangar entrance. "Some missions chose you," Phoenix thought as she pulled pitch and lifted off into the darkness. "Some missions demanded everything you had and asked for more." This was one of those missions. The flight across the Pacific took 14 hours with 2 aerial refueling stops, each one a carefully orchestrated dance of timing and fuel calculations. Phoenix had flown this route before during official deployments, but never with the weight of an unauthorized mission pressing against her shoulders. Torres proved herself incapable co-pilot. handling communications and navigation, while Phoenix focused on keeping their borrowed MH-60M invisible to radar systems that weren't supposed to detect them. They crossed into Afghan airspace at 3:47 local time, following a flight path that avoided known surface-to-air missile sites and kept them below radar coverage. The landscape unfolded beneath them in shades of gray and black, mountains and valleys carved by centuries of warfare, and shaped by the blood of empires that thought they could tame this unforgiving land. Phoenix, we're 20 minutes out from the target grid, Torres reported, her voice tight with concentration. I'm reading multiple heat signatures on infrared, but the pattern doesn't match friendly forces. Phoenix adjusted their approach vector, using a ridge line to mask their thermal signature from ground-based observation. Taliban. Negative. Movement patterns suggest organized military formation. This looks like a coordinated assault in progress. The radio crackled with fragments of communication, broken transmissions that painted a picture of American operators under heavy fire and running low on ammunition. Phoenix recognized the voice of Mongoose's team leader, calm despite the circumstances, but carrying the edge that meant time was running out. Taking heavy fire from the north wall, ammunition critical, need immediate extraction. Phoenix switched to the emergency frequency. Groundhog 6, this is Phoenix inbound your position. ETA 15 minutes. Can you hold? The response was punctuated by automatic weapons fire. Phoenix, Groundhog 6, we can hold but be advised they've got RPGs positioned on the high ground. Your approach is going to be hot. Phoenix had flown hot extractions before, but never without official support, never without backup assets standing by if everything went wrong. This time, if she went down, no one was coming to get them. The thought should have been terrifying, but instead she felt the familiar calm that came with accepting mortal risk for something larger than herself. Torres, I need you to monitor our 6 during the approach. Soon as we cross that ridge line, we're going to light up every thermal imaging system in a 10-click radius. Copy that, Phoenix. Phoenix dropped their altitude to barely 50 feet above the valley floor, using the terrain to mask their approach until the last possible moment. The mountains rose around them like sleeping giants, their peaks touched with snow that glowed pale under the star-filled sky. Beautiful and deadly, like everything in Afghanistan. Through her night vision, Phoenix could see the compound ahead, a collection of mud brick buildings surrounded by high walls, muzzle flashes strobing in the darkness as two forces exchanged fire across a courtyard no larger than a basketball court. The Americans were holed up in the northern building, their position marked by the disciplined 3-round bursts of M4 rifles. The attacking force had them surrounded but hadn't pressed the assault, content to wait for daylight and better visibility. That patience was about to cost them everything. Phoenix keyed her radio. Groundhog 6, Phoenix is 30 seconds out. I need you to mark your position with infrared strobes and get ready to move. This is going to be a hot pickup. Copy, Phoenix, marking our position now. Through the aircraft's thermal imaging system, Phoenix could see 6 heat signatures moving inside the compound, converging on what appeared to be a flat section of roof suitable for helicopter landing. The building was partially collapsed, victim of RPG fire or improvised explosive devices, but the roof looked solid enough to support their weight for the few seconds this extraction would require. Torres, spin up the minigun. Soon as we clear that wall, we're going to take fire from multiple positions. Phoenix pulled the collective, trading forward airspeed for altitude as they crested the compound wall. Immediately, tracer rounds began streaking past the cockpit, green lines of death that painted patterns across her night vision display. She held the aircraft steady despite every instinct screaming at her to break away, to abort, to survive. But below her, 6 American operators were fighting their way across a roof, trusting her to hold position long enough for them to reach safety. Trust was everything in special operations. Trust in your equipment, your training, and most importantly, in the warriors standing beside you. The first operator reached the aircraft as Torres opened up with the door-mounted minigun, sending 7.62 rounds into the enemy positions with mechanical precision. Phoenix felt the familiar vibration of combat, the deadly ballet of extraction under fire that she'd performed dozens of times in her career. But this time felt different. This time felt final. "Go, go, go!" Torres shouted into her headset as the operators scrambled aboard. Phoenix could feel the aircraft settle as additional weight was added, could hear the controlled chaos of wounded men helping each other into a helicopter that represented their only chance of survival. An RPG streaked past the tail rotor, missing by less than 3 feet. Phoenix didn't flinch. She'd been closer to death before and would be again if she survived the next 10 minutes. Through the cockpit glass, she could see Mongoose climbing aboard, blood seeping through his tactical vest but his rifle still at the ready. "Phoenix, we're loaded," Torres called. "Get us out of here." Phoenix pushed the cyclic forward and pulled pitch simultaneously, trading altitude for airspeed as they cleared the compound walls and dove toward the valley floor. Behind them, the compound erupted in muzzle flashes as the Taliban force realized their prisoners were escaping. But they were too late. Phoenix had done what she'd come to do. She'd brought her people home. The flight back to friendly airspace took 43 minutes, every second measured in heartbeats and fuel consumption. Phoenix kept the aircraft low and fast, using valleys and ridge lines to break up their radar signature, while Torres monitored communications for signs of pursuit. In the cargo area, a Navy corpsman worked on Mongoose's wounds, while the other operators maintained security, their weapons trained on windows and doors despite being 500 feet above ground. Professional paranoia, the kind that kept people alive in places where relaxation meant death. "Phoenix, we've got company," Torres announced, her voice cutting through the engine noise. 2 aircraft on radar, bearing 180 closing fast. Phoenix checked her displays. Afghan Air Force helicopters, probably Mi-17s equipped with door guns and rockets, fast enough to catch them, armed enough to end this mission permanently. She could try to outrun them, but her fuel situation was already critical. She could try to fight, but 2 against 1 were bad odds in any language. Or she could do what she'd always done when regulations conflicted with reality. She could improvise. "Torres, get me the emergency frequency for Bagram Air Base." "Phoenix, we're not authorized to." "Get me the frequency." Torres complied, her hands shaking slightly as she tuned the radio. Phoenix keyed the microphone, knowing that every word she spoke would be recorded and analyzed by intelligence officers who would spend weeks trying to understand how a grounded pilot had ended up over Afghanistan with a cargo hold full of operators who didn't officially exist. "Bagram Control, this is Army 91260000, requesting immediate clearance into friendly airspace. We are conducting a combat rescue operation with wounded personnel aboard." The response came after a pause that lasted forever. "Army 91260000, you are not on our flight schedule. Identify yourself and state your mission authority." Phoenix could see the pursuing helicopters growing larger in her rear display. 30 seconds, maybe less, before they were in weapons range. Time for the truth, or at least as much truth as she could share over an open radio frequency. "Bagram Control, this is Lieutenant Commander Alvarez, calling Phoenix, conducting emergency extraction of American personnel. We have wounded aboard and are being pursued by hostile aircraft." Another pause, then a different voice, older and carrying the authority of someone who'd made life-and-death decisions before. "Phoenix, this is Colonel Martinez, Bagram Base Commander. You are cleared direct to runway 3. Emergency services are standing by." The pursuing helicopters broke off at the announcement, recognizing that their quarry now had official protection. Phoenix felt the tension drain from her shoulders as they crossed into friendly airspace, her fuel gauges reading nearly empty but her mission finally complete. She'd kept her promise, she'd brought them home. The landing at Bagram was controlled chaos, emergency vehicles surrounding the aircraft before the rotors had stopped turning. Mongoose and his team were whisked away by medical personnel and intelligence officers, their debriefing already beginning before their feet touched the tarmac. Phoenix shut down the engines and began the post-flight inspection, her hands moving automatically through procedures she'd performed thousands of times. Colonel Martinez approached as she climbed down from the cockpit, his expression unreadable in the harsh light of the runway floods. Phoenix came to attention, knowing that her career was about to end, but proud of the mission she just completed. "Hell of a thing, Commander," Martinez said quietly. "Unauthorized flight, violation of national airspace, conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline." He paused, studying her face. "Also one of the finest pieces of flying I've seen in 30 years of military service." Phoenix said nothing. There was nothing to say. She'd made her choice in that diner 12 hours ago, and she would live with the consequences. Some things were more important than career advancement or pension benefits. Some things demanded everything you had. "Walk with me, Phoenix." They moved away from the aircraft, away from the chaos of emergency vehicles and intelligence personnel. In the distance, Phoenix could see the sun rising over the Hindu Kush mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Beautiful and deadly, like everything in this ancient land. "That team you extracted," Martinez said, "they were gathering intelligence on a terrorist cell planning attacks on American soil. High-level stuff, the kind that saves thousands of lives." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Their mission was so classified that officially it never happened, which means officially you never flew this extraction." Phoenix felt a flicker of hope, quickly suppressed. She'd been in the military long enough to know that miracles were rare and always came with a price. "What are you saying, sir?" Martinez smiled, the expression transforming his weathered features. "I'm saying that according to my records, you've been here for the past week conducting routine training flights. Your aircraft has been undergoing scheduled maintenance, and you've been attending professional development courses." He handed her a manila folder. All properly documented, of course. Phoenix opened the folder, finding training certificates, maintenance logs, and flight records that painted a picture of a model officer conducting routine duties. No mention of unauthorized missions or international incidents. Her service record would remain clean, her career intact. But more importantly, 6 American operators would go home to their families. "There is one condition," Martinez continued. "You're being transferred to a new position, Special Operations Liaison, Pentagon assignment. You'll be working with a joint task force developing new tactics for combat search and rescue." His smile widened. "Seems like someone in Washington believes your particular expertise could be valuable." Phoenix nodded, understanding the subtext. She'd proven that she could accomplish impossible missions when regulations stood in the way of bringing warriors home. Someone with serious influence had decided that talent was too valuable to waste behind a desk or in a courtroom. She thought about the SEAL in the diner, the desperate trust in his eyes when he'd passed her that envelope. She thought about Tors, willing to risk everything for a brother she'd never see again if this mission had failed. She thought about Morrison, working through the night to resurrect an aircraft that everyone claimed was beyond repair. Some missions chose you. Some missions demanded everything you had and asked for more. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very good, those missions chose to let you live to fight another day. The C-130 transport back to the States gave Phoenix 14 hours to process what had happened, to understand how a routine night at a diner had transformed into a career-defining mission that officially never occurred. Tors sat across from her, both women sharing the comfortable silence of warriors who tested themselves against impossible odds and emerged victorious. The younger pilot had been offered her own transfer, a position with the 160th's most elite unit where her skills would be appreciated and her questions wouldn't be asked. She'd accepted immediately, understanding that opportunities like this came once in a lifetime for pilots who dared to color outside the lines. "Think we'll see them again?" Torres asked, referring to Mongoose and his team, "the operators we extracted." Phoenix considered the question. In the shadowy world of special operations, successful missions often meant that the participants disappeared back into the classified universe they'd emerged from. No awards ceremonies, no public recognition, just the knowledge that you'd served something larger than yourself. "Probably not," she said finally, "but that's not why we did it." Torres nodded, understanding. They'd done it because American warriors were in danger and needed help. They'd done it because sometimes the right thing and the legal thing weren't the same thing. They'd done it because when the moment came to choose between career safety and moral courage, they'd chosen courage. The aircraft banked as they began their descent into Andrews Air Force Base, the lights of Washington, D.C. spreading out below them like a constellation of power and politics. Somewhere in those buildings, intelligence officers were already analyzing the information Mongoose's team had gathered, preparing briefings for officials who would never know how close they'd come to losing assets that didn't officially exist. Phoenix thought about her new assignment, the opportunity to work with the kind of people who understood that sometimes rules had to be broken to achieve the mission. She thought about the pilots and operators she'd train, the tactics she'd develop, the missions she'd plan that might never be acknowledged but would save American lives. It wasn't the career she'd imagined when she'd first put on the uniform, but it was the career she'd earned through blood and skill, and the kind of moral courage that couldn't be taught in any military school. Some missions chose you, Phoenix reflected as the wheels touched down on American soil. Some missions demanded everything you had and asked for more. But the best missions, the ones that really mattered, were the ones that chose to let you keep serving long after the shooting stopped. The Pentagon assignment came with an office on the 4th floor, a security clearance that required her to sign documents she couldn't discuss with anyone, and access to mission files that officially didn't exist. Phoenix found herself working with a joint task force comprising the military's most unconventional thinkers, operators, pilots, and planners who specialized in missions that fell between the cracks of normal military doctrine. Her first briefing included satellite photographs of terrorist training camps, intelligence reports on American hostages, and contingency plans for operations that would never appear in any official records. It was exactly the kind of work she'd been born to do, the intersection of tactical flying and strategic thinking that demanded both technical skill and moral courage. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen ran the task force with the quiet competence of someone who'd spent decades making impossible decisions. During Phoenix's first week, Chen pulled her aside for a conversation that would define her new role. "What you did in Afghanistan," Chen said, "that kind of initiative is exactly what we need here. But initiative without wisdom gets people killed. Your job is to develop tactics that give our operators the best possible chance of success while maintaining plausible deniability." Phoenix understood. She would be designing missions that pushed the boundaries of what was legally and tactically possible, operations that required the kind of precision flying and split-second decision-making that had defined her career. But now she would be training others to execute those missions, passing on hard-earned lessons to a new generation of warriors. Her first assignment involved developing extraction procedures for a hostage rescue mission in Somalia. The target building was surrounded by hostile forces, the approach routes were covered by heavy weapons, and the extraction window was measured in seconds rather than minutes. Exactly the kind of impossible scenario that had drawn her to special operations flying. Phoenix spent 3 weeks designing the mission profile, analyzing approach vectors and defensive positions, calculating fuel loads and weapons configurations. She drew on every lesson she'd learned from a decade of combat flying, every close call that had taught her the difference between acceptable risk and suicide. The mission launched on a moonless night in October, executed by pilots she'd trained using tactics she'd developed. Phoenix watched from the operations center as drone footage showed two MH-60s threading through urban terrain at altitudes that would have been considered impossible just a few years earlier. The extraction was flawless. 6 hostages recovered. No American casualties. The aircraft vanishing into darkness before local forces could respond. Officially, the mission never happened. Unofficially, Phoenix received a handwritten note from the task force commander. Exceptional work. The families of those hostages will never know your name, but they're sleeping safely tonight because of what you designed. It wasn't the kind of recognition that appeared in personnel files or award ceremonies, but it was the kind that mattered. Phoenix had found her calling in the shadows between official policy and moral necessity, training warriors to accomplish missions that couldn't be acknowledged but had to be completed. 6 months into her Pentagon assignment, Phoenix received an unexpected visitor. Mongoose appeared in her office wearing civilian clothes and carrying the subdued confidence of someone who'd been given a clean bill of health after extensive medical treatment. The wounds from their Afghanistan extraction had healed, leaving only small scars that added to his collection of reminders from a career spent in harm's way. "Wanted to thank you properly," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "What you did that night, flying an unauthorized mission into hostile territory to extract personnel who didn't officially exist, that took the kind of courage they don't teach in flight school." Phoenix studied his face, nodding the way his eyes constantly scanned the room despite being in one of the most secure buildings in Washington. Old habits from a lifetime of operations where relaxation meant death. "How's your team?" "Recovered, reassigned. The intelligence we gathered prevented 3 separate terrorist attacks on American soil." Mongoose leaned forward, his expression serious. "Thousands of people are alive today because you were willing to flip that table in the diner." Phoenix remembered that moment. The SEAL's desperate trust, the envelope full of coordinates and hope, the decision to abandon career safety for moral courage. It seemed like a lifetime ago, but she could still feel the weight of that choice pressing against her shoulders. "Any regrets?" Mongoose asked. Phoenix looked around her office, taking in the mission files and classified photographs that covered every surface. Her new assignment had given her the opportunity to save American lives on a scale she'd never imagined possible, training operators and developing tactics that pushed the boundaries of what special operations could accomplish. "None," she said finally. "Some missions choose you." Mongoose smiled, understanding exactly what she meant. He stood to leave but paused at the door. "There's something else. Your call sign Phoenix. I looked into it, talked to some people who flew with you during your early deployments." Phoenix waited, knowing that her call sign carried a story she'd never fully shared with anyone outside her squadron. "They said you got that name after a mission in Iraq. Helicopter went down in hostile territory. Crew chief was critically wounded, enemy forces closing in from all sides. You stayed with him for 6 hours, fighting off 3 separate assaults while calling in airstrikes on your own position." Mongoose's expression was respectful, almost reverent. "They said you rose from the ashes of that crash site like a mythical bird, carrying your crew chief to safety despite taking 2 rounds yourself." Phoenix nodded slowly. That mission had defined her understanding of what it meant to be a warrior, not someone who sought glory or recognition, but someone who refused to abandon their people regardless of personal cost. The call sign had stuck because it captured something essential about her character, the refusal to stay down no matter how many times she was knocked to the ground. "The funny thing about Phoenix birds," Mongoose said, "is that they don't just rise from ashes once. They do it over and over again, every time the situation demands it. He opened the door, preparing to return to whatever classified mission would next require his particular skills. Thanks for rising again when my team needed you. After he left, Phoenix returned to her work mission, planning for operations that would never be acknowledged, training pilots who would risk everything for people they'd never meet, developing tactics that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in the shadows between war and peace. She thought about the diner, about the moment when a stranger's desperate trust had transformed her life completely. She'd thought her career was over, that the grounding and disciplinary hearing had marked the end of her service to something larger than herself. Instead, it had been a beginning. Outside her office window, the sun was setting over Washington, D.C., painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that reminded her of Afghan mountains and the eternal cycle of missions that shaped the lives of warriors. Somewhere in the darkness, American operators were preparing for missions that would test their courage and skill against impossible odds. Phoenix opened a new mission file, began sketching flight paths and calculating approach vectors for an operation that would officially never happen, but might save American lives in ways that couldn't be measured or acknowledged. Some missions chose you, she thought as her pen moved across tactical diagrams that would become tomorrow's reality for warriors she would never meet. Some missions demanded everything you had and asked for more. And the best missions, the ones that really mattered, were the ones that taught you that rising from ashes wasn't something you did once. It was something you did every day, every time the mission demanded courage over comfort, sacrifice over safety. Phoenix was exactly where she belonged, in the space between impossible and necessary, training warriors to accomplish missions that couldn't be acknowledged but had to be completed. The Phoenix had risen again, and she was just getting started.